Sir Isaac Newton, one of the great philosophers and scientists of the 17th century, I knew that would raise Otto's head. He's quoted as saying, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants. If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." Some of you might be familiar with that phrase, "I stand on the shoulders of giants." If you've watched any shows like the Grammys or the Oscars, the BET Awards or the NAACP Awards, you often hear the winners acknowledging those that came before. I stand on the shoulders of giants, followed by a litany of great people in that field. Let's go back to the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus was standing there with two giants of the faith, Moses and Elijah. What happens when the great giants of the faith disappear? What happens when Moses and Elijah can no longer be seen and it's only the one person? For the disciples, having been schooled or brought up in a culture that embraced the history of Moses and Elijah, and I'll say more about that, it felt like the giants have disappeared. It's like Lutherans without Martin Luther, or Methodists without John and of course Charles Wesley, Pentecostals without William Seymour. Jesus is okay with our ancestors, the giants of our faith. He's okay with that. Moses represents the law. Moses was the liberator, the hero of the past, the hero of the people. Moses went up against Pharaoh and declared, "God's will, let my people go." Moses performed various miracles by the hand of God. He led the people out of bondage. Moses also went up to the mountain and was also covered by a cloud and brought down the 10 Commandments and all the laws associated with that. Can we agree? Moses was a giant of the faith. Elijah was an outspoken prophet. He also, like Moses, declared the will of God. He challenged the great King Ahab, great and cruel King Ahab. He called him to the book. He called him to righteousness. Elijah did all kinds of miracles too, from feeding the widow and her son with a little bit of flour and oil. Remember that? The widow was about to die and Elijah said, "Give me something to eat." And when she did, he blessed it and they ate for days and days. Elijah was the one who regularly talked with God. Elijah loved to go up the mountains. Often the king would say, "Come down from the mountain." Elijah performed the great miracle of raising the little boy from the dead. This boy who was the son of the woman that hosted him. Moses and Elijah were historical heroes, giants on whose shoulders the leaders of Jesus' time stood. Jesus, with the help of his Father, had the audacity to remove them just when the disciples were ready to build some monuments of the great giants of their faith. When Jesus is associated with our history, then he seems okay. Then Jesus seems like the homegrown hero when he's associated with our history. But when he's not associated with our history as a people, he throws us off, makes us afraid. The disciples became afraid. And Jesus had to calm them down. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Now let's be honest, we too have our historical Moseses and our Elijahs, right? Our fathers and mothers of the faith, the founders of University Evangelical Lutheran Church. Or personally, people who have inspired us to faith through our lives. It could be our parents. It could be our mother, like in my case, who taught us how to pray and read the Bible every day. It could be those who taught us Scripture. It could be those who came before us in the history of the church through the generations. All of these shape our frame of reference and give us a reference point to our faith. But when our faith is tested beyond that frame of reference, shaped by the giants in our lives, then we are at a loss. It's happening today throughout the church that our faith is being shaken. Through the years, the ELCA, in its various declarations, which we call social declarations, have lost people. Not so long ago, since August of last year, we have lost people. Here in our conference, Pinelands Conference, we lost at least 60, if not 100 people, after the ELCA declared that we will be a sanctuary church. Because when the Lutheran Church started, it was a church of conquerors that came with those from Europe who took over the land. And now suddenly, the goalposts are changing. The giants are being contradicted. And so we want to reach for the comfortable. We become afraid. We're looking for the proverbial comfort blanket. Yet God is calling us to the new. When Isaiah said the words of God, when he said, "Behold, I am creating a new thing," can you not perceive it? Can you not recognize it? When Jesus came, many thought, even amongst his disciples, that he was simply coming to fulfill the law. Yes, he came, but he came to create something totally new. Elijah and Moses represented the old. Jesus was not saying, like I said last week, I'm replacing that, but he says, look, there's something new coming. Yes, there's a law of love, but I'm embodying love. I'm not asking you to just simply follow the letter of the law. And so, the image on the Mount of Transfiguration of the three standing there, and then the cloud coming over them, and then God the Father saying, "This is my Son. This is my Son. This is who I want you to follow. This is who I am pleased with." That whole experience shook those who stood on the shoulders of other giants. You see, the transfiguration is not about Jesus being transfigured. Yes, he was transfigured. His clothes shone like white. I tried to wear the whitest alb today. But that whole incident on this high mountain is about the transformation, dare I say, the transfiguration of the disciples. representing what happens to us. Paul says, if we are in Christ, we are new creations. All old things have passed away, and behold, all things have become new. It shakes the foundations of our world when we get to know who Jesus is. When it changes from following the rules to letting the rules rule your heart. I'll give you an example. The rule said, love your neighbor, and how they understood it was, love those around you. And Jesus came and said, no, love your neighbor for sure. On that and loving God stands all the commandments. But let me tell you something. Your neighbor is anyone throughout the world who has need. A new day. I'm not throwing out Moses or Elijah. But I bring a law that I will put on your heart. And I will lead you every day. When a crisis comes in our life, whatever the crisis is, our faith is often shattered. It's so good to be able to refer to something familiar when we are faced with a crisis. Sometimes we even go back in history to those times where we didn't have these crises. We think about those times in our lives where things were really good. Alex and Sarah, I'm going to say this, take it with a pinch of salt. The honeymoon is not yet over. And when you're married for a long time, you can ask Rachel. Times get tough. And then what keeps you going is that first year. Oh, better still, what keeps you going is that time when you first met, when you had butterflies in your stomach and the world looked like syrup and chocolate. Where Valentine's Day was every day. We reach for something that we are familiar with. When the shoulders of our histories and those that shape our histories as giants are not high enough, or when it's outside our reach, when we are in the mysterious clouds, maybe the words of the hymns, particularly this hymn, God moves in a mysterious way, should come to our hearts. This one particular line, judge not the Lord by feeble sense. Judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust Him for His grace. Behind a frowning providence, He hides His smiling face. Behind a frowning providence, He hides His smiling face. The disciples were shocked when the giants were removed from them, but behind that frowning providence, the cloud and the confusion and the noise, the booming of the voice, as most of us hear it dramatically, came this word. This is my Son, the beloved, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to Him. When we hear that, we realize that we don't need the shoulders of the giants of history to stand on, the giants of our personal histories or the histories of the church. So when there's no shoulders of giants to stand on, remember that by grace alone, through Jesus Christ, we just simply stand.